The islands that make up the Philippines rise from the sea like scattered jewels in the heart of Southeast Asia. Yet unlike its neighbors, the Philippines entered history already bound by foreign rule before it ever had the chance to form its own united kingdom or shared culture. Long before the arrival of the Europeans, people had been moving into these islands from what are now Indonesia, Malaysia, and even southern China. Waves of migration brought language, trade, and belief systems, shaping a diverse and complex archipelago long before it bore its modern name. By the late 14th century, a new faith began to take root. Traders from Arabia brought with them the message of Islam. Men like Karim al-Makhdum sailed across the seas, establishing mosques and spreading their faith with surprising speed. Two sultanates soon rose in the southern islands, uniting communities under the crescent banner. For a time, it seemed the entire archipelago might follow the same path. But fate had other plans. In 1521, another world power appeared upon the horizon, Ferdinand Magellan leading an expedition. Under the Spanish flag, landed on the shores of Cebu. To the Europeans, this was only a waypoint on their journey toward the fabled Spice Islands, but to history, it marked the birth of a new empire in Asia. Magellan claimed the islands for Spain and quickly sought friendship among the locals. He won the favor of Raja Humaban, ruler of Cebu, who accepted baptism into the Christian faith alongside his queen. For Magellan, this seemed the dawn of Spanish glory in the Pacific. The Raja urged his neighboring chiefs to accept the same faith and pledge loyalty to Spain. Many agreed, but on the nearby island of Mactan, one man refused. Datu Lapu Lapu rejected Spanish authority and the command of any foreign power. When Magellan heard of this defiance, he saw a chance to prove his worth to his new ally. He decided to face Lapu Lapu himself and force him into submission. At dawn, Spanish soldiers and their native allies landed on the beaches of Mactan. The tide was low and their heavy armor slowed them as they marched across the reefs. The warriors of Lapu Lapu stood ready with spears and blades carved from bamboo and iron. The battle that followed was fierce and short. The Spaniards fell one after another, their matchlock guns and crossbows proving useless in the shallows. Magellan himself was struck down, surrounded by warriors fighting for their home. His death at Mactan marked not only the failure of his expedition, but the beginning of a long and brutal history between conqueror and conquered. The survivors fled back to Cebu. Soon after, many of them were poisoned during a feast hosted by Raja Humabon himself, perhaps as revenge for the chaos brought upon his land. The remaining Spaniards abandoned their mission and sailed back to Spain, under the command of Juan Sebastian Elcano, completing the first circumnavigation of the globe but leaving behind a land now forever touched by European ambition. For decades, Spain hesitated to return. Yet in 1565, King Philip II sent another expedition led by Miguel López de Legazpi, determined to establish a permanent colony. With a small force, he fought off the Portuguese, who claimed the same territory, and secured Spain's hold over the islands. In 1571, the city of Manila was founded, destined to become the beating heart of the Spanish East Indies. Through the years that followed, the Spanish expanded across the lowlands, converting vast numbers of Filipinos to Christianity, but not all submitted. The Muslim communities of Sulu and Mindanao resisted fiercely. The Spaniards called them Moros, a name that echoed the centuries-long wars they had fought against Muslims in Iberia. In 1578, a new conflict erupted. The Castilian War pitted Spanish forces and their Christian allies against the Sultanate of Brunei. The Spaniards sailed to the capital Cotabato with Filipino and Bornean troops and even managed to occupy the city. Yet tropical disease proved a deadlier enemy than swords or guns. Dysentery and cholera ravaged their ranks, forcing them to withdraw after just 72 days. The Bruneians regained their city, though the scars of war would linger for centuries as Spain continued its attempts to expand the faith. And the crown's reach throughout the islands, for all their efforts, Spain's colony remained poor and unstable. The endless wars drained its treasury. Moros raided the southern coast. Dutch ships prowled the western seas. From the north came Japanese pirates known as Waco, attacking ports and villages alike. The colony teetered constantly on the edge of collapse. Then in the mid-18th century, another storm broke out. The 7 Years' War between Britain and France spilled into the Pacific. When Britain declared war on Spain in 1762, the British East India Company set its sights on Manila. British troops landed and besieged the city. After fierce fighting, they captured the Spanish capital on October 4th, 1762. 4. Nearly 2 years Manila remained under British occupation until peace was restored in 1764. Spain regained the islands, but something deeper had changed. During the occupation, many of the local Chinese merchants known as the Sangli sided with the British, tired of the discrimination they had faced under Spanish rule. The event revealed how fragile Spanish control truly was. Even after peace returned, distrust simmered, and the colony entered a period of reform. The Spanish crown ended its ancient galleon trade in 1815, a monopoly that had long tied Manila to Mexico. In its place came freer trade and the Royal Company of the Philippines, which lasted until 1834. By then, Spain's colonies in Latin America had won independence, cutting off key trade routes and forcing the Philippines to open its ports to the world. Manila became a hub of global commerce, its harbor filled with ships from Europe, Asia, and America. Sugar, tobacco, and hemp flowed outward in great quantities. For the first time, the islands began to prosper, though the wealth reached only a privileged few. By 1863, education became another frontier of reform. The Spanish introduced a public school system, but it remained tightly controlled by the church. Only a small fraction of children could read or write Spanish, and fewer still spoke it fluently. Among the wealthy elite, a different path emerged. Sons of influential families were sent to study in Europe, where they encountered the ideas of liberty and national pride spreading across the continent. These young men returned with a vision of a modern Filipino nation, and soon they began to demand reform. This intellectual awakening gave birth to what became known as the propaganda movement. Writers and thinkers used their pens to challenge centuries of colonial oppression. Foremost among them was Jose Rizal, a physician and novelist whose works opened the eyes of an entire generation. His books, Noli Me Tangere or Touch Me Not and El Filibusterismo or The Reign of Greed, exposed the hypocrisy of the colonial government and the corruption of the church. Rizal returned home in 1892 and quietly formed the Liga Filipina, an organization seeking peaceful reform and representation within the Spanish Empire. But the seeds of revolution had already been planted. Across the islands, resentment grew. The promises of equality were never kept. The people yearned not just for reform, but for freedom. In 1896, that yearning ignited into the Philippine Revolution. Rizal, though uninvolved, was arrested and accused of treason. Despite his innocence, he was executed by firing squad in Manila, a martyr whose death united the nation more than any speech or sword ever could. Leadership of the revolution passed to Emilio Aguinaldo, a young general from Cavite who led the struggle against Spanish forces. Though brave and determined, Aguinaldo faced immense odds. His revolution faltered, and by 1897, he was forced to sign the Pact of Biak na Bato, agreeing to exile in Hong Kong in exchange for peace. But not all rebels laid down their arms. General Francisco Macabelos established a new revolutionary council, ensuring the fight would continue. As Spanish troops tried to suppress the rebellion, events beyond the island's shores changed everything. In 1898, war erupted between Spain and the United States after the mysterious explosion of the American battleship USS Maine in Havana Harbor. The United States blamed Spain and declared war. In a single stroke, the world's newest power would challenge one of its oldest empires. American forces sailed into the Pacific, and within months, Spanish power in the Philippines collapsed. The Battle of Manila Bay ended with total American victory. The once mighty Spanish Empire that had ruled these islands for more than 3 centuries was finished. When the smoke cleared, a new flag was raised, not the red and yellow of Spain, but the stars and stripes of the United States. For the Filipino people, the fall of Spain marked the end of one era, but not the beginning of the freedom they had dreamed of. The islands would once again find themselves under the shadow of another empire. From the arrival of Magellan to the fall of Manila, more than 300 years had passed. 3 centuries of conquest, conversion, and resistance had shaped the Philippines into a land unlike any other in Asia. It was a place where East met West, where the sword of conquest clashed with the spirit of faith, and where every generation had to redefine what it meant to be Filipino. The story of the Philippines is not one of defeat, but of endurance. Each invader brought change, but never complete submission. The people adapted, survived, and carried forward fragments of every era, shaping them into something uniquely their own. When Spain's rule finally ended and America's began, the heart of the Filipino people remained unbroken, ready once again to fight for the promise of a nation that could finally call itself free.